What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
And it's not manipulation, and it is persuasion, but it's more about helping them be motivated to pursue something better.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're stuck in their comfort zone too. So sometimes as the recruiter, you have to paint that picture for the candidate or the client to help them alleviate their own pain.
Yeah, and especially when you're leading top producers, what I'm about to say impacts them just like a recruiter will impact the client or candidate. It has to do, you're guiding the decision-making process. You're not forcing the decision-making process. You said that this individual, you can't motivate somebody. You have to create an environment that lights a fire inside of that person to be able to move forward. And if they feel like you're after their best interests as opposed to the numbers you want on the board, it's a totally different sense of engagement, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And so help me with this, because you triggered this thought in my head, especially when you talk about selecting people who are not, having people and creating a non-transactional environment, but they're looking. Do you have a vetting process that you use to be able to select people that are sort of wired that way versus the person who might be more transactional? It's a big question I keep getting asked by clients and people who listen into our podcasts.
What I've done is I've hired people from customer service type positions because a customer service person is customer oriented. They're not self-oriented. So we've hired a lot of people from like enterprise rent-a-car, the hotel industry.
One of my favorite. I love enterprise.
Yeah, that's what I came out of too, is the enterprise system.
Did you? That explains that.
Yeah. So it's, the way enterprise people are evaluated is this customer service quotient. They call it, I forget, ESQI, they call it. But so, those type of people that are oriented towards the customer centric, not the quick transaction, but the long-term benefit. Would they come back to you again? And sometimes that means doing something that is not in your own best interest. That's
a great question, isn't that? To ask in the interview process, to ask them, where have you had an opportunity to be able to do something where you served a customer that wasn't in your own best interest?
Yeah.
That's
a good question.
Yeah,
because there's times where like I'll help a candidate say, this is not the right job for you. Or I'll tell a company, if I were in your shoes, I would not hire my candidate. And the recruiters that are watching are like, what? Don't do it. But at the end of the day, when they see that you're a fiduciary, a true advisor, that you're not looking at things with dollar signs in your eyes, it's so differentiating. One aside from the Bible and legacy, the most impactful book that I've read is called The Go-Giver. And it's the principles in that book are also just so tremendous, and they're foundational for the way I run TMAC Direct.
Yeah, especially when you're looking to having that, building a culture of serve first, benefit later. It's an engaging catalyst that pulls people in. And so if you look at legacy, there's so many principles that I think a leader can gain from. We talked about making noble choices. What are some of the other principles that are, I'm not gonna say your favorite, because I've written books before. I don't have favorites. I just depends on who I'm talking to, something pops out. But what are a couple of the other principles that you think are really of high importance for somebody to really grasp?
There's a character in the book called Lundy, and he's my favorite character. He's like this Samuel Eliot type country squirrel. and he helps Abel along. One of the things he kind of tough loves him a little bit. And one of the things he talks about is not going halfway, that you see things through. Now, I want to also just say there are times when a leader gets halfway down the road and sees this was a bad choice. It also takes strength to say, you know what, we have to course correct. But there's a point in time where there is no turning back. And you got to bravely press forward and make the best of situations. So I love Lundy in that principle. He says only a dead squirrel goes halfway. and the reason I thought of that is when I lived in Georgia, the road is always littered with squirrels that only went halfway.
Yeah. My dad called that roadkill, but we won't go down that road. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, if you're indecisive in the road is when you get squished.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just sprint across the road and go across, you don't. And so that's one of the principles that are in the book. But really, the big foundational principle is from Abel's dad about how to use fear. Fear can be an amazing catalyst forward. He calls it like a wild horse that you can ride. It's this opposing force that once you get on top of it, you can ride it far and fast. So I think leaders have to use fear to push them forward and help their people that are also feeling feared to hop on that horse too.
Yeah, with the team that you have right now, because we're in an unusual market. I can measure my career in decades as opposed to years.
Okay.
But the cycle, this churning thing that started getting turned upside down with COVID. And while I'm not going to say COVID's in our rearview mirror, it kind of sits out there, but economically we pushed through that and moved forward well. But we're still in a place right now where people are trying to figure out what's around the corner. Where are we? Is a recession coming? What's going to affect us? What's going to take place? You got election cycle, which is my least favorite cycle to go through because of all the stuff that gets churned up and everything gets really blurry. I think that people right now, the word that I keep hearing consistently in the interviews and the people I'm meeting, literally from Canada down to South Africa, is the word uncertainty. That we're in what a lot of people refer to as uncertain times, and people are fighting for certainty, which they'll never get, but that's what we pursue. Big setup for me to ask you the question of, with the team that you're currently leading, is there something that they're dealing with that you have to help shepherd, that they're either afraid or concerned about, or having kind of angst or anxiety about in today's time?
Yeah, one of the big principles in the book is this whole concept of beyond the finish line. It's sort of similar to what's your why and that sort of thing. And so what I've noticed with any kind of recessionary downturn or any whatever you want to call it, there's this point in time where you start upward. And there's like this little V that happens where there's a lot of opportunity in the least amount of competitors, because on that downward slope, some of your competitors go away. They can't hang on. They get scared, they move, they pivot, or they just go out of business. And so we're in one of those right now. We're in the pharmaceutical industry, and it has been recessionary. It's like COVID had this delayed effect on the pharmaceutical industry, and now we're feeling the effects. But we know it's temporary. Whenever you know pain is temporary, you can get through it. Especially if you know what's on the other end is good. It's like a line at Disney World. Yeah, it's painful to stand there for 2 hours, but you know the ride at the end is going to be great. So what I just keep in focus with my team is what's beyond the finish line. When we start heading upward and we're the only game in town, all the pain is going to be well worth it. And so I try to positively spin it. This is a time to develop great habits. Because in a candidate-driven market, when candidates and clients are jumping in your boat, you don't really learn how to fish. So now's our chance to really learn how to be great at this business. And when the market rebounds, we're going to outshine everybody.
Yeah, it falls in line with the work that I do called Work of Leaders, which is they've interviewed, 300 thought leaders globally and 150 best-in-class companies. And what they found is, from a leadership standpoint, there's 3 stages that make people rise to the top. The first one is cast a vision. You have to be able to cast a vision. Once you cast a vision, the second is now build alignment. What do you need to do to build alignment, getting people aligned to that vision? And then third is championing execution. Well, the challenge I know that I run into is I'll do a little bit of one, sometimes none or two, because I want to get to number 3. Let's make something happen. But what you're talking about is keep people focused with clarity on, your vision, their vision. What are they trying to accomplish? What's happening? What's the end result? What's on the other side of the hill? So they can do what I refer to as take steps. Because what happens is the end result always comes from a series of steps. It's not a giant jump, not a giant leap. It's taking a step from here to here to here. And I think back on the production that you ran when you were with the MRI organization. You didn't make one big deal that put massive amount of money in your bucket. It was a series of, placements of things you did. And those series of placements were not a result by themselves. They were a result because of all the activity that you did that led to that type of productivity. For people who want to lead top performing individuals or be a top performing individual themselves, either way, I'm just really curious. What might you share that you learned at MRI when you were driving that kind of performance, and what you've learned since then? Because my understanding is your performance has actually even gotten even higher with what your capabilities are. What lessons did you learn that if you were leading Michael Pietrack today, this is how you would lead him better to perform higher level at a quicker rate of speed?
Wow. Speed is important in this business. What I would tell any high performer, or even a low performer, anybody that's in a is all you can control is today. You can control it. I call it laying bricks. Every day we get to lay bricks. And at the end of a series of time, you're going to have a cathedral. You'll have something massive. But you don't have that in one brick. Like you said, it's laying bricks, organizing them in a structured way. And so it's all about daily activity, and it's keeping score. Like there are times when I'm trying to lose weight and I know I haven't really been productive in doing that. I'm scared to step on the scale. And I think a lot of recruiters and a lot of people in other professions, they don't want to look at the scoreboard because they know they're not winning. But so for us and our performances, we look at the scoreboard every day. We know what success looks like, and we try to hit that every day. Some days we don't. Some days life gets in the way. But if you can focus on those daily activities that push you forward, that'll be huge. But what I would say to me, if I was managing myself, is to be careful of the comfort zone. Because when you have nothing to lose, it's easy to be fearless and brave. Fear doesn't have such a big impact. But then when you have everything to lose, it becomes a lot scarier to push forward and maybe even take a risk. And so what I've plateaued at times because I get stuck in that comfort zone and don't take the next risk to grow my business. And we can go into some of those little growth points that I've had, but that would be how I would manage a high performer, is talk about that.
I love that managing you and watching you develop, especially because of this, is that, this thing about keeping score. When I joined up with Steverson and Company to start up our accounting division, which was a desk and a phone, and that was pretty much about where we started from. I learned something from Tommy Steverson, the founder of the company. That she told me something, Mike, the number that you look at is a number that will change. And I just that anchored in my head. The number that you look at is a number that will change. Are you willing to look at what key, they call them KPIs, key performance, and are you willing to look at that number? Because we all have them, but a lot of times, because we're not hitting the ones we want to hit, we have a tendency to not look at it because we don't want to be staring in that mirror. So I love what you talked about as far as keep score. And the second thing about be careful of the comfort zone. It's that place where that if you get caught up into it. But what have you seen in yourself and others around you that helps people get get out of the comfort zone, to push themselves out of the comfort zone? Is there one or two techniques or one or two tidbits that you have that would help a leader or somebody who's is at a high performance level, wants to be at a high performance level, to encourage them to take a step in that direction?
A quick story that'll get to the point. I had a relative that was 105 years old. And when he was 102, he and I were having a conversation, and I asked him a very similar question. 102, what's the secret? And he said, never stop learning. And he pulled out a smartphone, and he showed me all the apps on his smartphone. And he said, and he started talking about technology. And I'm sitting there with my dad, who refused to have a smartphone and refused and all that. So when I think about those two different personalities, I think it's really analogous to how to break out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
At some point, we've reached where we think is the top, and we don't want to break through that next threshold. And it's because we don't continue to learn what's new, how to utilize it, like AI. A lot of people are bucking up against it, and that was my first reaction too.
Mhm.
But now I'm like, you know what? If it's here to stay, I got to be the best at it. I got to learn it. What are the intricacies? How can I use it better than my competitors, and especially my clients? So I think if you take that, you'll naturally break out of comfort zones. One of the other things I did to break out of my comfort zone is I started using video about 10 years ago.
I remember that. That's when you and I kind of first met about that time. You were just starting to use it.
Yeah. And so, but it's been such a differentiator. And now more and more people are using it. And so for me, I have to find what that next thing is to always stay one step ahead of the competition. Because if you allow everybody else to catch up, you'll never stay ahead. And I think that's what staying in your comfort zone does, is it helps, it allows everybody else to catch up.
Yeah. And it's, I think one of the things that I've experienced that keeps people in their comfort zone, and me included, is comparison. I compare myself to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I do that, what happens? I'm looking in the wrong direction, because if I compare myself to you, I may not see any growth or development. But if I compare myself to where I was, I see myself moving forward. You talk about video. I love the fact that I no longer have an office. I got a studio now. But the pandemic is what pushed me into that, because we stopped having face-to-face meetings. And since my business model built around me getting in front of people in a room, and that wasn't happening, I had to, I hate the word pivot, it's been overused, but I had to go through and figure out some steps to take. And what I found is that if I compared myself to other people, I thought they're doing a much better job at that than I am, versus this is where I was. Now look what I'm capable of today. And what I'm capable of today is 100% better than what I was the other day, because I wasn't doing anything the other day, but I'm only half as good as I'm going to be in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's that journey, because I love that from a development standpoint. Is that's what you're making me think about, is where am I putting the mirror up? Am I looking at myself, or am I pulling binoculars out? I can learn from others, but I can't compare myself to others.
Well, let me just draw this back to the book, if you would allow me
Please.
to. There's two characters. The first two characters that Abel meets when he actually goes into the great wood, this vast unknown. The first person that he meets is a cynic, a person that tells him how little the odds are, how dumb what he's doing is, and that he should just go back. Now, we may meet that literal person on our journey, or it just could be a voice in our head. What I find is people that get stuck in their comfort zone become cynical. So we have to fight against that. So the character's name is Sova. You gotta shake away the Sovas in your own head. The next character that Abel meets is named Mama Dawn. It's this loving, caring deer that tries to get him to stay with her. And she tries to, not that she's trying to do anything bad, she just wants to keep him safe. So when we're in our comfort zone, we feel that soothing voice to stay, and we grow cynical about how dumb pursuing something great is. So those are the voices. that if you're on any kind of entrepreneurial journey, or if you're trying to break through a plateau, that you're going to have to silence.
Yeah, I'm glad it's a great way for us to put a bow around this, because I was trying to find a way to go back and take one more shot at legacy. And the reason for that is that I encourage our listeners, our viewers to go on Amazon, go look for this, pick this thing up. And the reason why is because it's a great mirror, is the way I look at it. Because you will recognize a piece of yourself in a lot of the different characters, depending upon where you are, and that will change depending upon what day of the week it is. But what the reason I was, Michael, I was so anxious to talk to you is not to do a book report on this. And
Sure.
I hope that our listeners recognize that what we were trying to do is to talk about principles that this book captures, but that Mike has lived out, and that is used to really have impact on really what I consider to be top production levels, which is what people aspire to. And so I want to thank you for sharing your time, your experience, and more importantly, people can tell your heart for helping others, reaching others by talking about your journey that you've been on. So I want to thank you for all that you've shared today. I'm going to give you one more opportunity. Is there a question that I haven't asked, or is there something that we haven't talked about you'd like to leave as sort of a last little thought for our listeners?
Well, just like my dad would tell us to be noble on the way out the door to school, for an individual contributor or a leader of a business, I would just give the same advice. Be noble. If you can run your business with be noble as your mantra, your motto, good things are always going to happen. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, you continue to win business because you're different. And so as a parting shot, I would just say, be noble. And that's how the bees say goodbye. They give their heart to the other person and they say, be noble.
What a great gift to our listeners. So I thank you, Michael, for going out there and living a life that you make daily decisions on being noble. Your message encourages other people to take a shot at being able to do more than what they might think that they're capable of. So thanks for being part of our journey.
Thank you.
Challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.